My name's Marcus Reed, I said, extending a hand to Brittany. She shook it, reluctantly. Marcus, she murmured. I turned to Jake. We used to work together. You probably don't remember. Guys like you usually forget the ones you step on. Jake's face drained of color. Right, Marcus. From operations, I didn't respond. Just motioned for them to sit. The silence after that, absolutely beautiful. I never thought unemployment could feel like humiliation. Until it did. My name's Marcus Reed. I'm 33 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been the guy who blends into the background. I'm not loud. I don't show off. I listen more than I speak, and for years, I was okay with that. I believed in building quietly, staying low until it was time to rise. But the thing about staying quiet is people start writing your story for you. 2 years ago, I lost my job. It wasn't scandalous or dramatic, just a round of company restructuring that chopped off half our department like we were nothing more than budget lines on a spreadsheet. I walked out that day with a cardboard box, a forced handshake, and a lump in my throat. I wasn't devastated, not yet. I figured I'd bounce back. I had savings, a few freelance gigs, and an idea I'd been quietly working on in the background. Something I believed could turn into a real company if I gave it time. So, I took the leap. I didn't jump back into job boards or dust off my resume. I disappeared. Purposefully. I went dark on social media, told only my closest friends I was taking time to reset. And in that silence, I started building. But word got around, and in a small city, silence is dangerous. People fill in the blanks with their own fiction. The first time I felt it, I was at a bar. I dropped by a mutual friend's birthday gathering. I wasn't planning to stay long. I was sipping my drink in the corner when I saw Jake Simmons across the room. Jake and I used to work together. Loud, confident, always had something to prove. He wasn't my friend exactly, but we shared meetings, banter, and the occasional lunch. Now, he was leaning over a table with a drink in hand, telling a story far too loud for the room. You know Marcus, right? Smart guy, quiet as a ghost. Dude's been out of work for, a year now? Just disappeared, probably still living off his parents. Laughter erupted around him. Then I saw her. Brittany Lane, my ex. She laughed too. That one cut deeper than I expected. She and I had dated for 3 years. We split not long after I left my job. At the time, it felt mutual. Drifting goals, misaligned priorities. But seeing her there, laughing along with Jake, I realized maybe it wasn't just drift. Maybe she'd already jumped ship while I was still patching holes. I set my drink down and walked out without saying a word. That night, I sat in my tiny apartment. Barely furnished, code pulled up on one screen, the bar scene replaying in my head. They thought I was nothing. They thought I was done. But they were wrong. That was the moment I decided I wasn't just going to build something for myself. I was going to build something they would walk into without ever realizing who handed them the key. The world had labeled me jobless, a ghost, a failure. That label became my disguise, and beneath it, I started planning everything. After that night at the bar, something shifted in me. I'd already started building my startup, a B2B operations platform designed to streamline task management for mid-sized businesses. I'd written the code, tested early features, and even piloted it with 2 companies I used to contract for. But up until that point, I was moving cautiously, quietly, focused on execution, not attention. After hearing Jake mock me in front of Brittany and a dozen others, I decided caution was no longer enough. What I needed was patience and strategy. The funny thing is, people don't question you when you're quiet. They make assumptions, sure, but no one asks follow-up questions if you keep things vague enough. That's what I did. When old colleagues reached out, I said I was freelancing, consulting, just exploring a few ideas. They nodded and moved on. Meanwhile, I worked 14-hour days in my small apartment, turning a side project into a legitimate business. I filed an LLC under a name no one connected to me, Northbridge Ops, registered it out of state using a virtual office, even created a founder persona, EJ Northbridge, a generic-sounding placeholder name with no online footprint. I didn't need a fake identity, just a layer of distance, because I had a plan, and it wasn't just to succeed, it was to succeed in front of the people who counted me out, without them realizing it. The platform started gaining traction. Quietly, I onboarded 5 more businesses through referrals. Nothing massive, but enough to validate the product and give me recurring revenue. I reinvested every dollar into infrastructure, design, and a clean client-facing website that looked like it came from a 10 Meters-backed firm. Then I hired a recruiter. She didn't know who I was. She just knew I was the owner of a growing B2B software firm, looking to build a remote-first operations team. I gave her a budget and a list of skills I needed. She got to work. 3 weeks later, she emailed me a candidate list. I opened it slowly, not knowing what I'd find. But halfway down the list, there it was. Jake Simmons, operations specialist, and just 2 names below, Brittany Lane, admin, and account onboarding. I stared at the screen for a full minute, then laughed out loud. Not because I'd planned it, but because the universe clearly wanted to play along. I gave the recruiter the green light. Invite them to apply. Fast-track both. Within the week, they had interviews scheduled. Now, I knew they wouldn't recognize my voice. They'd never spoken to EJ Northbridge. All interviews were done via email, pre-recorded questions, or recruiter calls. Brittany submitted a neatly tailored cover letter. Jake's resume was full of buzzwords and barely relevant side projects. But I didn't care, because they weren't applying to work for a guy they once mocked. They were applying to serve the company I built after they mocked me. And that was only the beginning. Both were hired. Standard probation contracts, remote roles, mid-tier salary. To them, it was just another job. To me, it was phase 2. I gave them access to the system, generic onboarding, a faceless Slack channel. They worked under a mid-level manager I'd hired months before, Eli Tran, my only real ally from my previous job. Eli didn't know the full story. Not yet, but he would. Soon. For now, I watched. Watched how Jake took credit in meetings. Watched Brittany drop subtle jabs about useless exes when she didn't know Eli had been my roommate during our breakup. Watched them build their little narratives about who was in charge and who wasn't. Meanwhile, I was in every call, every document, every product decision. Their boss was silent, invisible, but always watching. And when the time came for the big reveal, they'd never see it coming. The beauty of operating in the shadows is that no one sees the chessboard until they're in check. Once Jake and Brittany were officially hired, the game began. They started work at Northbridge Ops the following Monday. Their roles weren't glamorous. Jake handled internal coordination and analytics, while Brittany worked in admin, onboarding new client accounts, and responding to low-level support requests. They were both assigned generic company emails, dropped into Slack with boilerplate introductions, and sent their welcome kits. They had no idea who was behind any of it. I designed it that way. All onboarding sessions were recorded. All communication with executives came from either Eli or the recruiter. Even the company documents referenced the founder as EJ Northbridge, an intentionally bland alias that sounded like someone too rich or too busy to talk to the lower ranks. No profile picture, no LinkedIn page, just a name and distance. The first few weeks, I did nothing but observe. Jake, predictably, slid into a leadership tone quickly. He was the guy who always talked louder in meetings and asked obvious questions just to seem engaged. In Slack, he wrote things like, "Let me take the lead on this team. I've done this kind of work before. We should really have a sit-down with upper management. There's room for optimization here." I let him. Brittany, on the other hand, was quieter, but no less revealing. She'd drop casual complaints in her DMs to Eli. "I miss working in a real office, you know. These remote places always feel like you're shouting into a void. Or worse, honestly, I feel like the leadership team's just another group of rich ghost bros, probably inherited everything." She didn't know she was describing me. Eli forwarded every message, not because he was spying, but because he trusted me as a founder. He still didn't know who Jake and Brittany were to me. He thought they were just hires, background characters. One day, he asked, "You ever plan to show your face to them?" I just smiled. Eventually. The real opportunity came when Northbridge Ops closed a deal with a mid-sized logistics firm that would double our MRR. It was our first big client, the kind that gets you media write-ups, industry attention, and higher expectations. We needed a face, or at least they thought we did. Eli suggested organizing a hybrid team gathering, small, in-person welcome dinner for key employees to meet the founder, shake hands, and present the project launch. I pretended to hesitate, then agreed. But I had a plan. Before I revealed myself, I wanted to give Jake and Brittany a chance to show their true colors. So I started appearing in the company Slack, under the founder name. A little more direct this time. Still no video, just text. Scheduled meetings through my executive assistant. Asked casual questions. They bit immediately. Jake DM'd Eli. "This Northbridge guy sounds like he's never worked a real job, probably just bought the company from Daddy." And Brittany replied in an internal thread about client onboarding. "Northbridge is so hands-off, I wonder if he even knows how the software works." I read every word, and I smiled, because soon they were going to find out exactly how much I knew. I greenlit the team dinner. A reservation was made, private room, modern venue, clean lines, tall glass windows, and soft ambient jazz in the background. Eli sent out the invite to 5 people. Him, Rachel Moore, our newly promoted lead designer, a quiet but brilliant back-end dev named Thomas, Jake, and Brittany. I RSVP'd last. Just signed my name, Marcus Reed, founder. I didn't send a follow-up, didn't explain, didn't prepare them. I wanted them to walk in, thinking this was just a celebration. Free food, nice wine, and a mysterious billionaire they'd never meet. Instead, they were walking into the most important meeting of their lives. The day of the dinner arrived with the quiet tension of a storm that hadn't broken yet. I showed up early. The restaurant was one of those minimalist modern places that whispered luxury rather than screamed it. No flashy signage, just frosted glass, warm lights, and the kind of polite hush you only get in places that charge for bottled still water. The private room had already been set. 5 seats, 1 head chair, white tablecloth, soft jazz bleeding through the soundproofing. I took the head seat. No nameplate, no announcements, just presence. 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps. Eli entered first, dressed sharp but modest. He gave me a quick nod. We'd worked together long enough that he trusted whatever I had planned, even if he didn't know the full backstory yet. Then came Rachel, who offered a polite smile, eyes scanning the room for the others. She didn't know me by face yet, but she had respect for the name. She'd been instrumental in our last product update. Jake and Brittany arrived last. Together, naturally, Jake strolled in like he owned the room, wearing a blazer with no tie, sunglasses still on, indoors. Brittany followed, heels clicking, wearing a designer bag she probably couldn't afford on our payroll. They barely noticed me at first. I could tell they assumed I was another executive, or maybe the restaurant manager. "Nice spot," Jake said, glancing around. Eli nodded. Marcus picked it. Jake smirked. Ah, the elusive Mr. Northbridge. Will he be joining us, or is this one of those video message situations? Rachel chuckled lightly. Actually, Marcus is right there. Jake's smile froze. Brittany blinked, confused. I stood slowly, extended my hand to Brittany first. Hi, Marcus Reed. She took it hesitantly. Wait. Marcus? I turned to Jake. We used to work together. You probably don't remember. Most of the guys you mock, you forget pretty quickly. Jake's face paled. Oh, right. Marcus. From, operations, yeah. I didn't respond, just gestured for them to sit. The silence that followed was beautiful. Brittany shifted uncomfortably in her seat, eyes flicking to the wine list like it held answers. Jake cleared his throat, forced a laugh. Man, small world, huh? Eli leaned back, watching the interaction with a dawning curiosity. Rachel, bless her, picked up on the tension immediately, but didn't say a word. Thomas, ever the quiet one, just nodded politely and pulled out his notebook. I let a few minutes pass. Then I spoke. I wanted tonight to be a simple team celebration, but before we eat, I figured it's only fair you all know who signs your paychecks. I locked eyes with Brittany. I own Northbridge Ops. I started it after I was laid off. Built it from the ground up. Every line of code, every design decision, every client pitch. It started in my apartment while the people around me assumed I was failing. Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Jake leaned forward, trying too hard to recover. Look, Marcus, man, I didn't know. I didn't realize you were, doing all this. That's amazing. I tilted my head. You didn't know because you didn't care. He laughed nervously. Okay, fair enough. But hey, no hard feelings, right? I turned to Eli. You remember when I asked you to vet those 2 hires personally? He nodded. Yeah, you said to flag any red flags. I looked back at Jake and Brittany. I didn't need Eli to vet you. I already knew who you were. They both went still. Jake stammered. Okay, hold on. Are you saying this was some kind of setup? No, I said. I'm saying it was a test. One you failed the moment you stepped into this company and acted like the leadership was a joke. Brittany looked like she wanted to disappear. I took a deep breath. I'm not angry, but I am disappointed. You walked into a company built by the very man you mocked for being jobless, and you brought the same energy that made you unbearable to work with before. They were both silent. Rachel raised an eyebrow. This just got very real. I nodded, and it's about to get more real. Because I wasn't done yet. For a full 10 seconds after I spoke, no one said a word. The soft jazz continued to play, and the clink of cutlery from the dining room outside somehow made the silence inside feel even heavier. Jake and Brittany sat there like mannequins, still dressed up, but stripped of every ounce of control they thought they had. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Let me be clear, I said, folding my hands calmly on the table. This isn't about vengeance, it's about values. Jake scoffed lightly, an involuntary, nervous reaction. Come on, Marcus. Look, I get it. You caught us off guard, but you have to admit, this is a bit theatrical. I didn't blink. You think this is about theatrics? You applied to a company without knowing who ran it, walked in, took the job, and then talked behind your boss's back in a company Slack channel you knew was monitored. Brittany's eyes widened. She must have realized then everything she said about rich ghost founders and useless exes. It had reached me, word for word. She opened her mouth. I didn't mean those things. I didn't know it was me, I cut in. That's the problem. You spoke your truth when you thought I was invisible. Brittany looked genuinely shaken. She glanced at Jake, maybe hoping he'd jump in and help her out, But Jake had gone quiet. For once, Eli finally spoke. I had no idea what your connection was to them, Marcus. You weren't supposed to, I said. I needed to see what they would do when no one was watching. Rachel, ever observant, added, so this was like a long game. You hired them on purpose? I nodded slowly. I didn't seek them out, but when they applied, I didn't pass on the opportunity. I wanted to know if people like them could change, or if they'd stay the same. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Look, man, you know how this industry is. People talk, they vent. It's nothing personal. Actually, I said, it's very personal. You mocked someone you assumed was beneath you. You made jokes at my expense when I had nothing, and you walked into a company I built without even checking who you were serving and kept acting like you owned the room. He fell quiet again. I turned to Brittany. You broke up with me when I lost my job. Told me I had no direction, no drive. Maybe you were right. Maybe I needed to fall apart to realize what I was capable of. But let's not pretend you left with grace. She whispered. I was scared. I was too, I said. But I stayed. There it was, the truth. She looked down, blinking fast. Jake gave one last push. So what now? You gonna fire us? Make a scene? I smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. No, I said, I'm going to do something worse. They both looked up, suddenly alert. I'm going to let you stay until the end of the month. You'll finish your tasks, complete your final projects, and hand off your knowledge to your replacements. I want documentation. I want professionalism. And I want the same level of effort you give when you think someone important is watching. Rachel almost choked on her drink, trying to hold back a laugh. And then? Brittany asked, voice cracking. Then, I said, you'll be dismissed. Quietly. No references, no letters of recommendation. Just a polite HR email thanking you for your time. Jake looked like he wanted to explode. But you won't fire us now, he said through clenched teeth. No, because I want you to walk back into that Slack channel tomorrow and know with absolute certainty that every word you type, every task you complete, every status update you post, I'm watching. The silence after that was deafening. Then I leaned back. Dinner's on me, eat up. They didn't touch another bite. When the evening ended, Eli and Rachel walked out with me. Neither said much until we got outside. Rachel turned and asked, was that revenge or justice? I took a breath. Neither, I said. It was clarity. And as Jake and Brittany sat alone in that room, too humiliated to stand, I finally felt the weight of their words fall off my shoulders. The next morning, in the company Slack, things were quiet. Eerily so. I logged in early, sipping my coffee, watching the green dots light up one by one as the team came online. Jake was usually one of the first to post something cocky in the main channel, some lazy motivational quote or a brag about finishing a task ahead of schedule. But today, nothing. Brittany popped in around 9:12 a.m. I saw her join the client onboarding thread. She typed, deleted, typed again. Then, nothing. Silence. They were rattled. Good. Eli messaged me privately. Well, that was the most awkward dinner I've ever been to in my life. Still trying to process. You good? I replied. Better than I've been in years. Thanks for being there. Rachel followed up with, legend move, Marcus. I won't lie. I rewatched the moment when you said you were their boss in my head like 5 times last night. Felt like a movie. That's when it really hit me. For years, I had believed the only way to prove my worth was to explain it, to defend my choices, to argue my potential, to justify my silence. But last night proved something else. Results speak for themselves. I didn't need revenge. I needed them to see me. And now, they did. By the end of the week, The energy shift in the team was unmistakable. The people who mattered, Rachel, Thomas, our engineers, and marketing crew, they were more motivated than ever. Everyone worked harder, communicated clearer, and for the first time, the company felt like a tribe. Even clients noticed. One of our biggest partners emailed me after a pitch call Brittany helped run. "Whatever's changed on your end, keep it up. Your team's sharper than ever." Irony, huh? The woman who left me for being lost now helped me close deals worth 6 figures, and didn't even know it was her last month. Midway through that week, I called a virtual meeting. Just the leadership team, minus Jake and Brittany. I laid out the roadmap for the next quarter, highlighted promotions, then paused. "I want to make one thing clear," I said. "This company was built on grit and respect. We don't need loud voices or big personalities. We need people who show up and care." Eli nodded. Rachel smirked. Everyone got the message. Jake didn't. He sent me a direct message that night. "Can we talk?" I let it sit. 4 hours later, another message. "Marcus, I know I messed up. I didn't recognize what you were building. I was stupid. Please, can we talk?" I replied the next morning. "We'll talk when the transition is done." He didn't reply. Brittany, meanwhile, had gone radio silent. She completed tasks on time, turned in clean reports, attended every meeting. But not once did she address what happened. I didn't expect her to. Some people process humiliation with anger, others with silence. She chose the latter. The final week of the month came fast. HR scheduled their offboarding. I signed their final performance summaries myself. Fair, honest, and without spite. Their access would be cut Friday at 6 p.m. sharp. That morning, Brittany sent me one last message. "I'm sorry, not for leaving you, but for laughing at you. That night, at the bar, I remember. You didn't say anything, and I should have known." I stared at the screen, then typed, "I remember, and I accept your apology. I hope you find what you're looking for. No more, no less." At 5:59 p.m., I watched their green dots vanish from the dashboard. At 6:01 p.m., I closed my laptop. It was done. The chapter that started with mockery ended not with an explosion, but with quiet resolution. And in that quiet, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. With Jake and Brittany gone, the office felt lighter. Not physically, of course. They had both worked remotely, but emotionally, the energy was different. People collaborated more fluidly. Meetings became faster, more focused, and best of all, no one dominated conversations just to feel important. But something inside me still lingered. The confrontation had happened. The offboarding was smooth. I had clarity. Still, I felt unfinished. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. It was about truth. And that truth still hadn't been shared. So I decided to do one last thing. Not to humiliate, but to solidify. At the next full team monthly all-hands meeting, I told Eli I wanted to make a brief founder's address. We normally kept these meetings light. Project updates, success stories, a few jokes in the chat. But this time, I asked for a few uninterrupted minutes at the top. Everyone logged in. Brady, from back end, wore a beanie that said, "I code, therefore I am." Rachel had a glass of wine in hand. "Team bonding," she joked. Eli smiled as he passed me, hosting privileges. I clicked the share screen button, but didn't actually share anything. Instead, I looked into the webcam. "Hi everyone," I began. "I won't keep you long. I just wanted to say something I've never said in a meeting before. Thank you." People typed quick reactions. I continued. "When I started this company, I had nothing. Not just financially, emotionally. I was coming out of a layoff, a breakup, and honestly, an identity crisis. Most people I knew either wrote me off or disappeared. A few quiet emojis trickled in. But I believed I could build something different, something better. And I did. Not alone. Not overnight, but with grit, help, and time. I took a slow breath. You've all heard of Northbridge, the mysterious founder no one ever met. Laughter popped in the chat. Someone typed, "Wait, are you saying you are the ghost boss?" I smiled. Yes, I am. EJ Northbridge? That's me. Well, part of me. It was a shell I used to build in silence, to protect what I was making until it was ready. Rachel's jaw visibly dropped. Wait, you're EJ? Guilty, I said. Brady typed, "This is like Batman revealing he's Bruce Wayne. WTF. People laughed. Some clapped. Eli leaned back and grinned. The truth was landing. Not as a scandal, but as a story. A story they were part of. Then I got serious again. I didn't hide out of shame. I hid because I needed to build without noise, without assumptions. And when certain people mocked me, I let them. Because their words helped shape this place. Not in spite, but in clarity. There was a pause. People knew who I meant. No one said the names. They didn't have to. I promise you, I continued, this company isn't just software. It's a reminder that you never know who's in the room, that talent doesn't always shout, that leaders can be quiet, even invisible, until the moment it counts. The chat flooded with reactions. Someone typed, "Respect just went up 1000x. Another, "This company feels even more real now. Thank you." I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally shared the whole truth. No more aliases, no more hiding, just me. Marcus Reed, the man they once laughed at. Now, the leader they'd follow. In the weeks following the all-hands reveal, something shifted. Not just in how the team saw me, but in how I saw myself. For the first time, I felt present, fully, authentically. No layers, no masks, no Northbridge moniker to protect me. Just Marcus, leading from the front instead of the shadows. And surprisingly, it felt good. The team's respect didn't waver. If anything, it deepened. Rachel sent me a message after the meeting. "Can't believe you were Northbridge this whole time. Respect." Also, "Damn, that was cold with Jake and Brittany. Legendary." Even Thomas, who rarely messaged anyone, wrote, "You're one of the only founders I've worked for who actually deserves to lead. Appreciate the way you handled all of it." Their support meant more than they knew. But not everyone stayed silent. A week after the reveal, I got an email from Brittany Lane. Subject, "I owe you more than an apology." I stared at the subject line for a long time before opening it. The body was simple, but it reeked of someone wrestling with guilt and self-justification at the same time. "Marcus, I've replayed everything in my head over and over. What I said, what I laughed at, what I chose to ignore. I didn't just leave you. I underestimated you. And that's on me. I know there's no going back, but I needed to tell you that I see now who you really are. And I'm sorry I never did when it mattered." Brittany, I read it twice, and then I archived it. No reply. Not because I hated her, because there was nothing more to say. She had seen me as a placeholder when I was down, and now, standing on my own ground, I had no obligation to let her back in. A few days later, I received a LinkedIn connection request from Jake Simmons. It was the digital equivalent of a handshake from a man who used to laugh behind your back but now wants to stand beside you again, because he realizes your shadow is bigger than his spotlight. I declined it. No message, no drama, just a quiet refusal. I didn't need to be dramatic. I'd already lived through the drama. Jake and Brittany were not enemies. They were reminders of how quickly people assign value to others based on surface-level metrics. job titles, appearances, social clout, and how easily they abandon loyalty for convenience. But more than that, they were case studies in a truth I'd always suspected. The ones who mock you when you're silent are never prepared for the day you speak with results. Back at the office, the culture we'd been quietly shaping began to thrive. New hires came in, not through recruiters this time, but through referrals from team members who believed in our mission. Every single person in the company now knew who I was, knew the story, and carried it like a quiet code of honor. No gossip, no arrogance, no status games, just results. And that was exactly the company I wanted. Eli pulled me aside one day during a break at our off-site team event, a cabin getaway we organized as both a thank you and a reset. He handed me a beer, leaned on the porch rail, and asked, "You ever regret letting them in?" I took a long sip before answering. "No," I said. "They helped me test the foundation. You don't know how strong a house is until it survives a storm." He nodded slowly. "Think they'll try to come back?" "They already have." "And?" I looked out over the forest. "Let the past knock," I said, "but I'm not opening the door." The story of Jake and Brittany quietly faded from company chatter, not because people forgot, but because the culture we built didn't reward lingering in the past. Their exit was silent. No public firings, no grand announcements, no gossip threads in Slack. Just 2 green dots that stopped showing up one Friday evening and 2 profiles that were gone by Monday. But their impact, that stayed. The team had seen what integrity looked like under pressure. And just as importantly, they saw what lack of it did to a career. People work differently now, more consciously, not out of fear, but out of respect. Because when the founder is someone who used to sit beside you in a shared cubicle, who rose without boasting, who watched silently while being disrespected and still didn't lash out, you tend to pay attention to your own actions. The best revenge, they say, is success. I disagree. The best revenge is clarity. Jake and Brittany gave me a gift, the chance to become who I was without needing to prove anything to them. And then the opportunity to show them who I'd become without lifting a single weapon. No yelling, no chaos, just the truth. And the truth, it humbles louder than anger ever could. A month after their departure, the company received our first industry award, Top 10 Fastest Growing SaaS Startups in the region. The news hit the trades. Our inbox exploded with investor interest and partnership offers. Rachel walked into my office that afternoon with a grin and said, "Think Jake reads TechCrunch?" I laughed. If he does, he probably dropped his coffee. Then I paused. But it's not about him anymore. And it wasn't. The company was scaling. We were hiring, expanding to new regions. Our Slack was buzzing with collaboration across time zones. Eli had stepped into an executive role and was thriving. Rachel had 3 designers under her now, mentoring them with the kind of leadership you can't fake. One afternoon, while reviewing quarterly reports, Eli said, "You know, you're different now." I looked up. "How so?" "You used to be focused on building a wall, something no one could knock down. Now you're building bridges, letting people in." He wasn't wrong. I had spent so long trying to protect my work, my image, my story, that I forgot why I started all this, to create something that outlives personal pain. Northbridge Ops was no longer about me. It was about us. That clarity, earned through humiliation, patience, and grit, became the cornerstone of our culture. We didn't talk about it in meetings. There were no posters or slogans, but everyone felt it. We had lived a cautionary tale and turned it into a foundation. One day, Rachel forwarded me a tweet. It was from a faceless tech meme account, just a black background with white text. Be kind. The intern you mock might be your boss one day. She captioned it, your autobiography in one sentence. I smiled, screenshotted it, and saved it. Not to share, not to repost, just to remember. Because the loudest lessons are the ones whispered through experience. And mine, it spoke for itself. A year passed. The company had grown beyond what I imagined in my tiny apartment that night. Alone, jobless, quietly mocked. We had clients across 3 continents now. A team of 42. Monthly growth in the double digits. More important than the metrics, though, was the atmosphere. Collaborative, driven, humble. The bitterness that once sat like a stone in my chest had worn smooth. That's the thing about success. Real success. It doesn't shout. It doesn't strut. It just shows up, gets to work, and lets the results talk. I took a step back from daily operations. Eli now led our expansion strategy. Rachel oversaw creative direction across all departments. Even Thomas, quiet and efficient, was managing a small engineering team. I wasn't needed for every meeting anymore, and I liked that. One sunny afternoon, I sat on the balcony of our modest new headquarters. Nothing flashy, clean design, open layout, local artwork on the walls. The kind of place that felt like home, not a performance. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Eli. Big investor asked about your story. You cool with me sharing the real version? I smiled and replied, let the story live. They can decide what to believe. Because here's the truth. I never needed to win against Jake or Brittany. They weren't villains in my life, just mirrors, reflecting who I was before I knew better, and what I could become when I finally believed in myself more than I feared their opinions. The day I stopped needing their approval was the day I became free. Still, I remember. Not out of spite, but out of gratitude. Gratitude that they laughed, that they underestimated me, that they gave me something to rise from. And now I carry their laughter like an old scar, visible only to me. A reminder that pain, when channeled, becomes purpose. Northbridge Ops became more than a company. It became my voice. The voice I had swallowed for too long. The voice I thought had no power. The voice that didn't need to yell, because now everyone listened. So I stood up from that balcony chair, took a breath of summer air, and walked back inside. Not with vengeance, but with vision. Not to prove anything, but simply to keep building. Because in the end, the best part of becoming who you were meant to be is never needing to look back.